Archiving started.
Hello, this is Dr. Laist. Today I want to discuss the story A Worn Path by Eudora Welty in terms of the various aspects of narrative that we have been talking about this semester. In summary, we would simply say that this story is about an African-American woman named Phoenix Jackson who travels along the Natchez Trace for the purpose of obtaining medicine for her sick grandson. But of course, there is more to the story than meets the eye, and one of the techniques we can use to begin our analysis of the story is to break it down in terms of its narrative elements: plot, character, and setting. We have said that all stories can be segmented into a beginning, middle, and an end, and A Worn Path follows this pattern. In the beginning, we meet Phoenix as she makes her lonely journey encountering various obstacles in the natural world, such as a steep hill, thorns which snag at her clothes, a log laid across a creek, and a maze. The mood of the story changes somewhat with the introduction of the white hunter, who helps her out of the ditch, but who also points his gun in her face. We can identify Phoenix's interaction with the hunter as indicating the middle of the story. Then at the end of the story, Phoenix makes it to the city of Natchez and picks up the medicine from the clinic. Segmenting the story in this way allows us to see the shape of the whole story at a glance. One of the aspects of the story we may perceive in this way is that Phoenix's journey seems to take place in 3 stages, and each stage of her journey involves different kinds of challenges. At first, Phoenix faces the challenge of negotiating her way through the natural world. Then the introduction of the hunter presents her with the challenge of negotiating a world of other people. And then in the city, she finds herself faced with the challenges of society as a whole. In this way, we can observe the levels of obstacles that Welty represents in the story, and we see how the physical obstacles in the beginning of the story develop into the more complex kinds of obstacles, racism, social stigma, and poverty, described at the end of the story. But we can also employ the beginning, middle, and end formula by breaking away from it. Like The Wizard of Oz, A Worn Path is organized around a journey. In a typical journey narrative, the hero starts off at home in the beginning, goes on the journey in the middle, and returns home at the end. That's the structure of The Wizard of Oz, for example. In A Worn Path, however, we never see Phoenix at rest. We never see her at home. She is constantly on the move. Her whole story can be seen as one extended middle, without a beginning or end. She is forever traveling, forever suspended in the air. Reading the story in this way emphasizes the open-ended quality of Welty's story. It begins in medias res, like Homer's ancient Greek journey narrative, the Odyssey, and the end of the story is not the end for Phoenix, as she still has to make the whole journey again in reverse for the return trip. And this whole journey itself, furthermore, is only one of many such journeys that Phoenix has made in the past and that she will continue to make in the future. When we consider this aspect of the story, we may think of it as a story about time itself, and the manner in which we all live in the flux of an extended middle. Of course, Phoenix's name alludes to the mythical bird that lives through cycles of destruction and rebirth. The very first sentence sets the story in December, the end of one year and the beginning of the next. And in the morning, the time when night turns over into day. Phoenix herself is described as a grandfather clock because of the way she walks, hobbling between one heavy step and one light step. In this context, Phoenix herself seems to partake of the natural cycles of day and night, the phases of the moon, and the seasons, as if she herself is a force of nature bound to a relentless orbit. But for all of her symbolic resonance, Phoenix also comes across as a human being. We had said that a flat character is one that lacks complex motivations, and Phoenix might be considered a flat character since all she seems to want throughout the story is to get the medicine for her grandson. But as we read the story more closely, her psychology appears a little more complex. One of the clues that Phoenix is not a stereotypical grandmother figure is her crafty theft of a nickel from the hunter. When she sees the coin fall out of the hunter's pocket, she cleverly sets 2 dogs against each other to distract the hunter so that she can carefully scoop the nickel up into her own pocket without being observed. We know that stealing is wrong, and we know that Phoenix is supposed to be the protagonist, so the reader has to invent a way of reconciling this apparent contradiction. Is it okay for Phoenix to steal from the hunter because he is a bigot and deserves to get taken advantage of? Or does Phoenix's extreme poverty provide an excuse for her behavior? Or are we to think of Phoenix as combining both noble and ignoble qualities? This would be another way of saying that we are supposed to think of her as human, as a round character. Indeed, at the very end of the story, she takes this nickel out again and holds it against another nickel that she receives from the attendant at the clinic. The two nickels, the one that was stolen and the one that she received by comparatively honest means, seem to represent two sides of her character, recalling the description of Phoenix in the first paragraph as balance between heaviness and lightness. Another conflict that helps to make Phoenix a round character is that, while she persists in her commitment to obtaining the medicine for her grandson, at several points in the story she seems tempted to give up the journey altogether and to sink down into restful death. At one point, sitting down to rest, she has a dream vision of a little boy who brings her a piece of cake, which she is happy to accept. This spectral vision seems to represent a fantasy of giving in to the temptation to stop the journey. Even more noticeably, when a black dog knocks her into a ditch, she lies down in the springy weeds and, unable to extract herself, seems resigned to remaining in this shallow grave indefinitely. It is just dumb luck that the hunter comes along and helps her out, but the suggestion remains that Phoenix is so old and so weary that the prospect of dying on her journey is not altogether unpleasant. Indeed, the frequency with which dream images intrude into Phoenix's reality suggests that she exists in a kind of borderland between consciousness and sleep, between life and death, providing another frame of reference for that balance between heaviness and lightness that Welty described in her initial description of her protagonist. The setting of the story, the American Deep South at some point in the first half of the 20th century, obviously plays an important role in the narrative. The disrespect shown toward Phoenix by the hunter and by the attendants at the clinic is clearly intended to be understood within the context of Jim Crow-era racial tension. While we can think of Phoenix Jackson as a kind of eternal, timeless pilgrim on the path between life and death, she is also a particular individual with a particular relationship to American history. We learn at the end of the story that Phoenix never went to school because she was too old at the surrender, meaning that when the South surrendered at the end of the Civil War and the freed slaves were offered the opportunity to get an education, Phoenix was already beyond school age. This revelation that Phoenix spent the first 2 decades or so of her life as a slave has a chilling resonance to her statement in paragraph 5. Seems like there is chains about my feet, time I get this far. Literally, Phoenix is having a hard time getting up the hill, and the difficulty of moving forward recalls the weight of leg irons. But the discovery that Phoenix was born a slave makes this passage more than simply a figure of speech. It connects her struggles on this journey to the struggles she has undergone her whole life as a victim of slavery. The path takes on another meaning as the difficult path of Phoenix's life. The fact that the purpose of this journey is to obtain medicine for her grandson adds another dimension to the symbol of Phoenix's path of life. The ultimate goal of the journey of life is to nurture the next generation. The grandson suffers from the effects of having swallowed lye, a corrosive alkaline substance that can produce serious chemical burns. The medicine Phoenix obtains may help the grandson's throat to heal. It may help him recover his voice. Of course, finding one's voice is a potent metaphor for achieving a sense of empowerment and social justice. When we consider the thrilling oratory of the generation of African American civil rights activists, such as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who would come to prominence in the 1950s and 60s, we may perhaps conclude that Phoenix's journey was not in vain. She did, in fact, do her part to ensure that the next generation of African Americans would have a voice. Examining a story with reference to plot, character, and setting may help to expose suggestive details and to highlight certain patterns or connections that can allow us to make statements about symbols and themes. Starting from the basic facts of the story, a literary analysis of a worn path moves towards statements about what this story suggests about human themes, such as reality and dreams, life and death, the past and the future, love and hate, good and evil, and time and eternity, as well as allowing us to speculate about political and historical issues such as racism, poverty, and social justice.